I often wonder if you can feel it, that peculiar sensation of being watched by something beyond the veil of ordinary perception, not with hostility, but with the patient gaze of primordial wisdom waiting for you to notice its presence. This video did not find you by mere chance. The synchronicity that brought you here carries the hallmark of Thoth's intervention, the ancient Egyptian deity known as the scribe of the gods, the keeper of sacred knowledge, the mediator between worlds. I have spent my life studying the archetypal forces that move beneath the surface of human consciousness, and I can assure you, when Thoth's energy enters your field of awareness, it signals that something profound within your psyche is awakening, something that has always been there, waiting. The ancient Egyptians understood what modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover, that consciousness itself is the primary creative force of existence. They knew that before anything manifests in material form, it must first exist as pattern, as symbol, as archetype. Thoth was their embodiment of this principle, not merely a mythological figure, but a representation of the cosmic intelligence that bridges the invisible realm of potentiality and the visible world of form. He is the keeper of what I have called the collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of primordial images and patterns that shapes all human experience across time and culture. What does it mean that Thoth has appeared in your consciousness at this moment? Why has this particular archetypal energy emerged from the depths to make itself known to you now? This is not a question to be answered intellectually, but to be felt with the totality of your being. For Thoth does not reveal himself to the distracted mind or the fragmented psyche. He appears only when the soul has reached a certain threshold of readiness, when it has developed the capacity to bear the weight of its own forgotten power. The Egyptians depicted Thoth with the head of an ibis, a bird that stands patiently at the water's edge, observing, waiting for the precise moment to strike. This imagery conveys a profound psychological truth. Wisdom requires patience, discernment, and timing. The ibis moves with deliberate purpose, neither rushing nor hesitating. So too does the awakening consciousness learn to navigate between the poles of impulsivity and paralysis, finding the middle path of meaningful action. Thoth's energy carries this quality of measured response, of knowing not just what to do, but when to do it. For millennia, the knowledge that Thoth represents has been encoded in symbols, concealed in rituals, embedded in architecture, and whispered through initiatic traditions, not out of some petty desire for secrecy, but because the unprepared ego cannot integrate such knowledge without inflation or disintegration. The symbols serve as containers, as vessels that can hold the transformative power until the psyche develops sufficient capacity to metabolize it. This is why genuine spiritual teachings have always been transmitted through symbol and metaphor. These forms communicate directly with the deeper layers of the psyche, bypassing the rational mind's tendency to reduce and objectify. What the Egyptians understood about Thoth parallels what I discovered in my investigations of the psyche. There exists within each of us a transcendent function, a capacity to reconcile opposites and generate new, more comprehensive patterns of meaning. This function operates through symbols, through dreams, through synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem to defy causal explanation. Thoth is the personification of this function, the embodiment of the psyche's innate capacity for self-regulation and evolution. When the ancient texts speak of Thoth as the scribe who records all things, they are pointing to what I have termed the objective psyche, that aspect of our inner life that observes, that witnesses, that registers every thought, every emotion, every action with perfect fidelity. Nothing is lost in the psyche, everything leaves its impression. The Egyptians knew this. which is why they portrayed Thoth present at the weighing of the heart in the afterlife judgment scene. He was not there to condemn, but to reflect back to the soul its own truth, its own vibrational signature. This is what I meant when I said that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires absolute honesty with oneself. What most fail to understand is that this judgment is not reserved for after death. It is occurring in every moment. Your psyche is constantly recording, constantly reflecting, constantly adjusting in response to your chosen vibrational state. And here we touch upon something the Egyptians grasped intuitively, but that modern consciousness has largely forgotten. Reality itself is responsive to the quality of our inner state. The external world arranges itself in accordance with our psychological condition, not through some supernatural intervention, but through the fundamental unity of inner and outer experience. What you perceive as out there is inextricably linked to what is happening in here. The boundary between subject and object, observer and observed, is far more permeable than our conventional thinking allows. Thoth stands at this boundary, this threshold between worlds. In Egyptian hieroglyphs, his name is written with symbols that denote measure, balance, and equivalence. He is the principle of correspondence, the living embodiment of the Hermetic axiom. As above, so below, as within, so without. This principle is not merely philosophical speculation, but a practical key to understanding the relationship between consciousness and manifestation. Your inner state creates resonant patterns in the external world. Your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs generate fields of probability that attract or repel corresponding experiences. This is not magical thinking in the naive sense, but rather an acknowledgement of the participatory nature of reality. Modern quantum physics has confirmed what the ancient mystery schools taught. The observer cannot be separated from the observed. Consciousness does not merely perceive reality, it participates in its creation. This does not mean that wishing makes it so. Such simplistic formulations miss the depth of the process. Rather, it suggests that by bringing consciousness to our inner patterns, by witnessing them with awareness rather than being unconsciously driven by them, we can begin to shift the vibrational field from which our reality emerges. The Egyptians understood that before creation there was thought, and before thought could become reality, it needed to be translated into word. This is where Thoth's role becomes crucial. He represents the power of sacred language, the bridge between formless potential and formed actuality. When the ancient texts speak of Thoth as sweet of tongue, they are acknowledging the creative power inherent in articulated consciousness. The word, whether spoken aloud or formulated within, carries a vibrational signature that ripples through the field of potential, attracting resonant elements into manifestation. This understanding was not unique to Egypt. Across cultures and traditions, we find the same recognition of the word as a creative force. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, in the beginning was the word. In the Vedic tradition, the concept of Vak as the divine speech that brings forth reality. In my own research, I discovered that certain primordial sounds and syllables appear across disparate cultures, suggesting their origin in the collective unconscious rather than historical transmission. These power words, or mantras, were not arbitrary, but reflected deep archetypal patterns that connected human consciousness to cosmic principles. Consider the word that has survived in our culture primarily as a magician's incantation, abracadabra. Most regard it as mere entertainment, a nonsensical phrase uttered before pulling a rabbit from a hat. But in its original Aramaic form, avracadabra, it carried the profound meaning, I create as I speak. This was not a claim of personal power, but a recognition of the human participation in the divine creative process. When you speak with consciousness, with presence, with alignment between thought, emotion, and intention, You are engaging the same creative principle that the Egyptians attributed to Thoth. But here, we must be careful. The ego is quick to seize upon such knowledge and bend it toward its own aggrandizement. This is why the tale of the Book of Thoth contains such a stark warning. In this ancient narrative, those who sought the book's power without the necessary spiritual preparation met with tragedy. The book itself was not the source of destruction. Rather, it was the misalignment between the seeker's consciousness and the knowledge they sought to wield. When ego-driven desire meets transcendent power, the result is always imbalance, always suffering. What most fail to understand is that true manifestation is not an act of imposition, the ego forcing its will upon reality, but an act of alignment, of attunement. The Kabbalists understood this well. In their tradition, to manifest is not to create something ex nihilo, but to receive what already exists in potential form. The word Kabbalah itself means to receive. You do not manifest what you want, you manifest what you are in vibrational resonance with. This is why affirmations often fail to produce results. They remain at the level of verbal formula without penetrating to the deeper strata of the psyche, where true vibrational patterns are established. The tree of life, that magnificent symbolic map of consciousness that the Kabbalists developed, illustrates this process beautifully. At the top is Kether, the crown, the point of pure potential. At the bottom is Malkuth, the kingdom, the realm of physical manifestation. Between these poles lie the various Sephiroth, the spheres that represent different qualities and dimensions of consciousness. For something to manifest in Malkuth, it must descend through the entire tree, gathering substance and form as it moves from the abstract to the concrete. This process parallels what I observed in the psyche's movement toward wholeness. Individuation, the becoming of the self, requires the integration of all levels of consciousness, from the archetypal to the personal, from the spiritual to the material. Nothing can be left out, nothing can be bypassed. When there is alignment between these levels, manifestation occurs naturally, effortlessly. When there is conflict, when one level contradicts another, manifestation becomes blocked or distorted. Consider how this plays out in your own experience. You may consciously desire abundance, yet unconsciously believe yourself unworthy of receiving. You may affirm health with your words, while your emotional body vibrates with fear and tension. You may seek love, while internally maintaining patterns of self-rejection. These misalignments create what I have called complexes, knots in the psychic fabric that bind energy and prevent its free flow. Until these complexes are brought into consciousness and integrated, your manifestations will reflect this inner fragmentation. The pentagram, that ancient symbol adopted by numerous mystical traditions, offers a visual representation of this integration. Its 5 points correspond to the classical elements: earth, water, air, fire, and spirit. In psychological terms, these represent the body, the emotions, the mind, the will, and consciousness itself. The power of the pentagram lies not in its external form, but in what it symbolizes: the harmonious integration of all aspects of the self under the governance of the higher self. Each element must be honored, each must be purified, each must be brought into right relationship with the others. Your body, the earth element, must be treated as the sacred vessel it is, not as a machine to be exploited or neglected. Your emotions, the water element, must be allowed to flow freely, neither damming them up nor being swept away in their current. Your thoughts, the air element, must be clarified, freed from distortion and projection. Your will, the fire element, must be focused, directed toward what truly matters rather than scattered among trivial concerns. And your consciousness, the spirit element, must expand beyond the confines of the personal ego to embrace the wider field of collective experience. When these elements are in balance within you, your very presence becomes a creative force. Your words carry weight, not because you have learned some secret formula, but because they emerge from a state of inner coherence. This is what the ancient mystery schools meant by magic, not the performance of supernatural feats, but the achievement of a consciousness so aligned with cosmic principles that manifestation becomes a natural extension of being. But such alignment is not achieved through force or strain. The ego cannot make itself whole through sheer effort. Integration comes through surrender, through allowing the self, what the Egyptians would have recognized as the divine principle within, to orchestrate the process. This requires cultivating what the Zen tradition calls beginner's mind, a state of receptive awareness free from preconception and expectation. It requires what I have termed active imagination, a dialogue between the conscious and unconscious, aspects of the psyche that allows for the emergence of new, more comprehensive patterns of meaning. The Egyptians understood this process as the journey of the soul through the duat, the underworld or intermediate realm between death and rebirth. This journey was not undertaken only after physical death, but was available to the initiate during life. By descending consciously into the depths of the psyche, by confronting the guardians and obstacles that dwell there, one could achieve transformation without the necessity of bodily death. This is the esoteric meaning of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It is not merely a guide for the deceased, but a map for the living soul seeking regeneration. In my own work, I have documented this same process in the dreams and active imaginations of modern individuals who have never studied Egyptian mythology. The symbolism emerges spontaneously from the collective unconscious, taking forms appropriate to the individual's cultural background, but preserving the essential pattern. This is because the process of psychic transformation follows universal principles regardless of the specific imagery through which it is expressed. What then is the practical application of this knowledge? How do you engage with Thoth's wisdom in a way that leads to genuine transformation rather than spiritual entertainment or ego inflation? It begins with silence, not the silence of repression or withholding, but the silence of deep listening. Before you can speak the creative word, you must create space for it to emerge. This means developing the capacity to quiet the incessant chatter of the ordinary mind, to sink below the surface waves of consciousness into the deeper currents where true creativity flows. In my practice, I advise patients to spend time each day in receptive awareness, neither forcing thoughts away nor becoming entangled in them. This creates an opening, a clearing in the psychic field where the archetypal energies can make themselves known. From this space of inner silence, authentic speech can emerge, speech that carries the resonance of truth rather than the hollow echo of habitual thinking. Next comes the practice of conscious speech. This is not about monitoring every word for negativity, which can lead to suppression and shadow formation. Rather, it involves bringing awareness to the vibrational quality of your communication, both inner and outer. When you speak, are you merely repeating conditioned patterns, or are you expressing something that resonates with your deeper truth? Are your words aligned with your emotional state, or is there dissonance between what you say and what you feel? Are you using language to connect or to distance, to reveal or to conceal, to create or to destroy? The ancient Egyptians had a concept known as Ma'at, cosmic order, truth and justice. Thoth was intimately associated with Ma'at, serving as her consort and complement. Where she represented the principle itself, he represented the activity of bringing that principle into manifestation through conscious intelligence. In psychological terms, Ma'at corresponds to what I have called the self, the organizing center of the psyche that transcends yet includes the ego. When your speech is aligned with Ma'at, with the self, it carries a creative potency that conventional communication lacks. This alignment is not achieved through formulaic affirmations or by avoiding negative expressions. It comes through the painful, beautiful process of becoming authentic, of allowing the false self, the persona, to dissolve so that the true self can emerge. This process involves confronting your shadow, those disowned aspects of yourself that you have deemed unacceptable and pushed into unconsciousness. It involves reconciling opposing forces within your psyche, finding the tertium non datur, the third thing that is neither one extreme nor the other, but a new synthesis that transcends the opposition. As you engage in this work of inner alignment, you will notice a shift in your relationship with language. Words will no longer seem like mere tools for communication, but will reveal themselves as living entities, as vessels of consciousness. You will develop a reverence for speech, an awareness of its consequences that goes beyond social consideration. To encompass its vibrational impact on the field of reality, you will speak less, but say more. You will listen not just to the content of others' words, but to the consciousness from which they emerge. And you will begin to notice something remarkable. As your inner state shifts, so does your outer experience, not in the crude, transactional way that popular manifestation teachings often promise. Visualize a car and it will appear in your driveway, but in a more profound reconfiguration of your entire field of experience. Synchronicities will increase, meaningful coincidences will abound, the boundary between inner and outer reality will become more permeable, more fluid. You will find yourself in resonance with people, situations, and opportunities that reflect your authentic being rather than your conditioned desires. This is not magic in the conventional sense. It is not the ego manipulating reality to satisfy its wants. It is participation in the fundamental creative process of existence itself. It is becoming conscious of what has always been happening unconsciously, the manifestation of reality. From the field of potential through the medium of consciousness, Thoth, as the personification of this process, is not separate from you. He represents an aspect of your own psyche, your own capacity for conscious creation. The Book of Thoth, that mythical text said to contain all wisdom, is not something external to be acquired, but something internal to be discovered. You are the book. Your consciousness is the medium in which the cosmic wisdom is written. Your life is the manifestation of what is inscribed there. The quest is not to find some hidden knowledge outside yourself, but to become able to read what has always been within you. This reading requires the development of what I have called symbolic thinking, the capacity to perceive meaning beyond literal interpretation, to sense the archetypal patterns beneath the surface of ordinary experience. The hieroglyphic script that Thoth supposedly invented was not merely a method of recording information, but a system of symbolic correspondence that connected human consciousness to cosmic principles. Each hieroglyph was a living symbol, a point of contact between the visible and invisible realms. In the same way, the events and circumstances of your life are hieroglyphs to be read, symbols to be interpreted. They are not random occurrences, but meaningful expressions of the underlying patterns of your consciousness. Learning to read these symbols, to discern the message in the manifestation, is an essential aspect of the work with Thoth's energy. It requires developing what the Sufis call the eye of the heart, the capacity to perceive with the intelligence of the soul rather than the limited vision of the ego. As this perception develops, you will begin to recognize that you are not the author of your life in the way you may have believed. You are not creating reality ex nihilo through the force of your will. Rather, you are participating in a co-creative process with the larger intelligence of the cosmos. Your role is not to impose, but to align, not to force, but to flow, not to control, but to collaborate. This recognition brings both humility and empowerment. Humility, because you understand that you are not the sole creator of your experience, but part of a vast, interdependent web of consciousness. Empowerment, because you recognize your essential role in the creative process, your capacity to influence the field through the quality of your presence and the clarity of your intention. What if you began to live from this understanding? What if you approached each day not as a series of tasks to be completed or obstacles to be overcome, but as an opportunity for creative participation in the unfolding of reality? What if you treated your speech, both inner and outer, as a sacred act, a ritual of manifestation? What if you brought the same reverence to your ordinary interactions that the ancient priests brought to their temple ceremonies? The wisdom of Thoth is not about escaping the mundane world for some transcendent realm of pure spirit. It is about bringing the transcendent into the mundane, about infusing ordinary reality with extraordinary consciousness. This is what the alchemists, those medieval heirs to the Hermetic tradition associated with Thoth Hermes, meant by the transformation of lead into gold. The base metal is not discarded, but transmuted. The ordinary is not rejected, but transfigured. This is the great work, the opus magnum, to become so aligned with the creative principle that your very existence becomes a manifestation of that principle in action, not for the sake of personal gain or aggrandizement, but for the sake of the whole, for the enrichment of the collective field of consciousness that we all share. This is what it means to live in service to Ma'at, to Thoth, to the self. It is not self-sacrifice in the sense of diminishment, but self-offering in the sense of fulfillment. You did not find this video by accident. The synchronicity that brought you here is itself a manifestation of the awakening process already underway within you. Thoth, that aspect of cosmic intelligence that bridges the visible and invisible realms, is already active in your field, already guiding you toward greater coherence, greater authenticity, greater creative participation. The question is not whether this process is occurring, it is, but whether you will engage with it consciously, whether you will become an active partner rather than a passive recipient. Will you take up the invitation that Thoth extends? Will you step into your role as a conscious creator, as a living embodiment of the Word made flesh? Will you allow yourself to remember what you have always known at the deepest level of your being, that you are not separate from the creative source, but an individualized expression of it? The choice is yours, as it has always been. The wisdom is available, as it has always been. The time is now, as it has always been. You are the last tablet upon which Thoth writes. You are the living hieroglyph in which the cosmic wisdom is encoded. You are the book of Thoth, waiting to be read by the eye of your own awakened consciousness. Are you ready to remember? Are you ready to become what you already are? As our journey together draws to a close, I invite you to pause, to feel the weight of this moment, this threshold between what was and what could be. The ancient Egyptians understood something profound about thresholds. They saw them not merely as physical transitions between spaces, but as sacred portals between states of consciousness. When you stand at a threshold, you exist simultaneously in two worlds, the familiar terrain you are leaving behind and the uncharted territory that beckons you forward. This is where you stand now, at the threshold of your own becoming. What does it mean to cross such a threshold consciously? It means to die before you die, to allow the old self with its limiting beliefs and conditioned patterns to dissolve so that a more authentic expression might emerge. The Egyptians called this transformation Kepet, symbolized by the scarab beetle, that pushes the sun across the sky each day. The scarab does not create the sun, it facilitates its journey. So too with your own transformation. You are not inventing yourself anew, but revealing what has always been present, always waiting to be recognized. Thoth stands at this threshold as witness and guide, not as some external deity demanding worship, but as a reflection of your own highest intelligence, your own capacity to bring order from chaos, meaning from confusion, light from darkness. When the ancients depicted Thoth recording the verdict, at the weighing of the heart, they were expressing a profound psychological truth, that part of you which observes with unflinching clarity is the same part that can initiate transformation. The hieroglyphs Thoth inscribes are not separate from you, they are you in your most essential form. Each thought you entertain, each emotion you cultivate, each word you speak becomes a living hieroglyph in the sacred text of your existence. These are not mere metaphors, but actual energetic imprints that shape the field of consciousness from which your reality emerges. You have been writing this text unconsciously throughout your life. Now you are invited to take up the stylus with awareness, to become the conscious author of your own becoming. What will you write with this newfound awareness? What hieroglyphs will you inscribe in the book of your becoming? Will you continue to replicate the patterns of limitation and fear that have been passed down through generations of unconscious living? Or will you dare to compose a new narrative, one aligned with the deeper currents of your soul's purpose? Remember this, manifestation is not something you do, it is something you are. Every moment of your existence is a manifestation, a making visible of your internal state. There is no separation between the inner and the outer, between what you are and what you experience. The world you perceive is not happening to you. It is happening through you, as you, from you. When you change the quality of your consciousness, you change the quality of your manifestation. Not through force or manipulation, but through alignment with what is most real, most true, most alive within you. The ancient texts speak of a time of great awakening, a time when the veils between worlds would thin, when the wisdom that had been sealed in stone and hidden in symbol would once again become accessible to the prepared mind and heart. That time is now, not because some external authority has deemed it so, but because the collective psyche has reached a point of crisis and opportunity, what I have called the tension of opposites. That makes transformation not just possible, but necessary. You are not here to merely survive this time of transformation, but to participate in it consciously, to contribute your unique note to the symphony of becoming that is unfolding across our world. This is not spiritual bypassing or escapism, it is the most profound engagement with reality possible, the recognition that your consciousness is not separate from the creative force that animates all existence. The Book of Thoth is open before you. Its pages are not filled with esoteric formulas or secret incantations, but with the simple, profound truth of your own being. To read this book requires not intellectual cleverness, but perceptual clarity. The willingness to see what is actually there, rather than what your conditioning has taught you to expect. It requires the courage to face your shadow, to integrate your disowned aspects, to become whole rather than merely good. This journey of wholeness is not a linear progression, but a spiral dance, a continual return to the center that is simultaneously a movement outward into greater expression. There will be times of clarity and times of confusion, times of expansion and times of contraction. All of these are necessary phases in the alchemy of consciousness. Trust the process. Trust the intelligence that is guiding you, even when, especially when, it leads you into territories your rational mind cannot comprehend. You did not find this message by accident. You were drawn to it through the magnetic pull of recognition. through the soul's affinity for what resonates with its own deepest knowing. Something in you already knows what these words are pointing toward. Something in you has always known. The time for forgetting is over. The time for remembering has begun. Are you ready?